Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It is myself, Henry, and Danny Abdul-Jabbar on the line. How's it going, man? How are you?
Doing good, man. How about you?
I'm doing well. I cannot complain. I cannot complain at all in this crazy, crazy world. I am going to the White House next week.
Are you?
Yeah.
Nice. Steal some napkins. I heard they have really good napkins.
I will take all the W's out of the keyboard. Do you ever hear that story about the Clintons?
No, what?
So it's a really funny story about when George W. Bush was the president-elect and the Clintons were leaving the office. The Clintons apparently ransacked the White House. They started stealing stuff, and they had to return a bunch of... They got in trouble. They had to return all the things that they stole.
What kind of things were they stealing?
Art and furniture. I'm not sure about furniture, but art and just a lot of valuable pieces of work. I think they stole an old urn from the 1800s.
Took the Constitution.
They took the Constitution. But something that I found really funny that they did is that they went to all the keyboards in the White House and he took all the W's out.
Why? So George W. Bush couldn't type his real name?
Yeah, exactly. So they took all the W's out of the keyboards. It's such a funny story.
I'm not even mad about that. That sounds hilarious.
Yeah, I'm not mad. That's first level trolling right there. Yeah. Before trolling was even a word.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll be in the White House. I'll be at the White House next week, assuming all goes to plan. Why I'm going to the White House? Well, I'm going on a lovely tour, and I'm also going to a couple of events over there. But I'll tell you more about that after the show.
Cool, man. Sounds good.
However, I wanted to get an episode out here to talk about our good old friends, the Beverly Hillbillies of the Middle East, aka Saudi Arabia. Does anyone get that reference? The Beverly Hillbillies of the Middle East?
No,
they struck oil.
Oh, okay, fair.
And you sent me an article. This initially got my attention on it when you initially sent me this article from Vice News.
That's right.
And basically, the headline of the article is, instead of punishing the Saudis for Khashoggi, Trump wants to hand them nuclear technology.
So what do you think about that?
So first, all right, I'm going to just kind of shit on the headline of this article. Instead of punishing the Saudis for Khashoggi, Trump wants to hand them nuclear technology. The headline is really stupid, is because you could have framed that in so many different ways.
Oh yeah.
You should have said, instead of punishing the Saudis for the illegal war in Yemen, Trump wants to hand them nuclear technology, but they have to base it around Khashoggi. And I guess it's because a lot of people are more aware of the Khashoggi murder than the actual war in Yemen. Mm-hmm. The war in Yemen is not sexy enough to be in the news, unfortunately.
Right.
There's too much humanitarian suffering there. So I guess the mainstream media doesn't follow it. The mainstream media loves following the Syrian war. Mm-hmm. Or they did love following the Syrian war, because that was just like, oh, ISIS, Assad, chemical weapons. But
that's right.
The mainstream media does not like to cover Yemen because I guess it's just a depressing subject matter, and it's just overly complicated as well. However,
and Americans would need to learn where the hell Yemen is on a map too.
Yeah,
so
most
they
people
just figured out where Syria is.
Most people don't know where Yemen is on a map, so I guess that is. I guess that, and also Vice. I mean, Vice does do good coverage on some things.
Yeah,
however,
they really do. Yeah.
This article, this headline is just so clickbaity. It pisses me off.
Hey,
to a certain degree.
That's literally the reason why I clicked on it. I'm not gonna lie, it worked. I was like, what? What is this? Because I hadn't heard about what we're about to talk about, and some nuclear technology deals here. But what really stuck out to me was this, instead of punishing Saudi Arabia for Khashoggi, and I'm like, oh god, where are we going with this one? But I agree with you. I think that the headline does a disservice to the article. I think the article's pretty well written, and I think it turns a lot of people off, especially people that might be on the opposite side of the Khashoggi debate as far as what the U.S. should have done about it. I think it completely shuts that off. And then this is a really interesting topic, and there's not a ton of coverage on it actually. So, I think, it sucks that the title was so clickbaity.
All right, so I'm going to get into the actual story. So a report from the staff of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform shows evidence that members of the Trump transition team tried to push through a plan to sell nuclear technology to Saudi Arabia. The good old Beverly Hillbillies of the Middle East. They struck oil. That's what happened, really. It's like the Saudi Arabian story is parallel to the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yeah.
The plan would have led to the construction of 40 nuclear power plants and facilities to enrich uranium fuel. The technology, while focused on civil nuclear power, could give the Saudis resources that could be used to build nuclear weapons. Could. That's a key word to take.
Could.
We'll get into that later.
Right.
The plan would also have pumped billions into a number of U.S. companies involved in the nuclear industry, and that's where the real concern comes. Labeled the Middle East Marshall Plan, which was spearheaded by IP3 International, a private company led by a retired admiral whose board includes a bunch of retired generals, ex-staff, and politicians. Flynn actually signed, Michael Flynn signed on as an advisor to IP3 just before jumping on the Trump transition team. The Saudi nuclear sale is the only deal that this IP3 International is currently working on. And I'm going to give kind of like a quick summary of it. So General Flynn was advising IP3 while serving as national security advisor.
Correct.
Flynn advocated for the IP3 nuclear plan, and according to the whistleblower where this committee comes from, where the genesis of this committee comes from, or this report comes from at the very least, the decision was already made by Flynn to move forward with the project, despite Saudi Arabia not signing a 1-2-3 agreement.
Right.
What a 1-2-3 agreement is basically the non-proliferation criteria.
Right.
So the committee launched to see if this is in the interest of national security or just a way for these generals and these ex-staff members and politicians to make a buck off the deal.
Right.
Because it kind of seems like that's what it is.
Yeah, no, totally.
And a quick note, the Saudis don't want to sign anything that will prohibit them from enriching uranium. So that's where the big concern comes from.
Right. And it's reasonable to be concerned about, I think.
No, it definitely is. It definitely is reasonable to be concerned about it. But I want to first get into kind of the common misconceptions about nuclear reactors and nuclear warheads, because you just say the word nuclear and people automatically
they go
nuclear
apeshit.
bombs and nuclear warheads.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a guilt by association, but they're totally different things. So
Yeah.
we first need to break down, to get a clear understanding of this story, the first thing you want to do is just know the difference between a civilian nuclear program and a weapon of mass destruction, a nuclear warhead or a bomb.
That's right.
So I'll go over what you're probably a little bit better on this technology stuff than I am, but I'll go over like what I know about it, and then if anything I get totally wrong, just correct me.
Yeah, you bet.
But a nuclear reactor and a nuclear weapon, they're both very different things. They have some things in common, and what they have in common is that they're both powered by fissile isotopes like either uranium or plutonium.
Correct.
And
specific uranium and specific plutonium, I might add.
Yeah. And fissile isotopes are elements that break apart when neutrons hit them. And when this happens, they produce more neutrons and fission products that release a bunch of energy.
Right. It's like dominoes, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
You knock one over, and then a bunch of them fall over after that. Creates a whole big kaboom.
Well, but here's the difference between nuclear reactors and nuclear warheads. With reactors, this is released over time.
Right. Controlled.
With weapons, it's released over...
Right now.
It's released right now. It's just all at once. So that's the major difference between a civilian nuclear program, one that's just used to produce energy for like daily activities and industry, and a nuclear warhead. One is released slowly and the other is released all at once and causes a huge explosion that kills everyone.
That's correct. That's
all
correct.
Right. Is there anything I'm missing with that?
One thing I would add is that, so I mentioned specific uranium and specific plutonium. I don't remember the name of the isotope specifically, but it's like uranium-235 or something like that.
Yeah.
And in order to get it, you have to refine it in a very, very specific way. And it is time-consuming. It's very technical, and you do need a sufficient amount of technology and obviously smart people that know what the fuck they're doing to make it happen. So it's not like here's a bunch of uranium fuel, go ahead and go make a bomb. Like getting the fuel itself for either energy or for bomb making is quite technically intensive. The difference between the fuels is that while nuclear reactors and nuclear bombs use the same fuel, the enrichment process is different. So by that I mean, I think it's like 1 or 5% enriched uranium is good enough for nuclear reactors, and you need 90+% enriched uranium for bombs. So I guess a couple of analogies that I can make is like octane on gasoline, right? So, you got the regular gasoline that you put in your car, and then you got like the super premium that's like a higher octane for like your sports cars and shit like that. But think of the divide as much, much bigger, right? It's like the difference between gasoline and rocket fuel, for example, made of completely different things, of course, but I guess it's a good way to put the analogy, right? You can't power, a rocket with, the gas that you put in your car, because it's just not, it doesn't burn hot enough. It's not as refined. I guess another way to put it would be the difference between like single distilled vodka and like 12 times distilled vodka, right? Difference between, say, beer and Everclear, right? It's just making, synthesizing it over and over and over again until it's so potent that it can be used for a bomb. So that's the one last thing that I want to point out, is that you need to enrich the fuel to quite a high degree in order to make it a bomb. And, the question that a lot of people have, I think, is that, can you use a nuclear reactor to build a nuclear bomb? And I think the question is framed wrong. The reactor itself, for a nuclear reactor, isn't producing the fuel. It is burning the fuel, so to speak, right? But the technology that is used to create nuclear reactor fuel is the exact same technology that you would use to create nuclear bomb fuel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically, if you lit a block of uranium on fire, it wouldn't explode.
Right.
All right.
I mean, you'd probably die from radiation poisoning first, but I get it.
but I think the major question is that, all right, so yeah, can they use nuclear? Can they use these nuclear plants in their genesis of creating a nuclear weapons project? That would be the number one concern. Like,
right.
Will the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have access to nuclear warheads?
Yeah.
And will the nuclear reactors that come from a civilian program be the genesis of that? I think the number two concern, and I think this would be the concern for like most people, when you say the word nuclear, is if a terrorist got into the nuclear facility and threw a stick of dynamite in the reactor, it would blow up everything.
That's not true.
That's not true, because first of all, that person who went there would die instantly.
Yeah,
when
they're very, very volatile.
And it wouldn't do anything, right? Like, it would just cause an explosion within the reactor. It wouldn't cause a chain reaction, because it would require that.
The worst thing that it could do is cause a meltdown, right? Which would be environmentally terrible, right? But it's not gonna set off like a nuclear bomb or something like that. Yeah.
So I guess the fear is, and what's not specific in these reports, is like, what exactly is the sensitive technology that's being, or that's trying to be pushed through?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So again, I mentioned to you before that the technology that is used to enrich uranium or plutonium for either nuclear reactor for like civilian energy generation, or to make nuclear weapons, is the exact same technology. Think of it like this. I could put a bunch of dough in the oven, right? And maybe I'll leave it in there for 10 minutes and it's still super doughy, but I could probably still eat it, right? It's like good to eat, good enough to eat, as opposed to baking it fully so that it rises and becomes like a full loaf of bread. That's like the bomb stuff. The concerns come because the same exact technology is used to produce either the fuel for the nuclear reactors or the bomb. It's not like two different sets of technology. It's just leaving it in the oven for longer, so to speak, to put it plainly. Where the concern comes in is that all nuclear capable nations, and I mean energy nuclear capable nations go through very stringent and INF like treaty laws where they have to regulate this stuff, right? They have to make sure that the fissile material that you purchase is being used specifically for the purposes of creating nuclear energy and not for creating nuclear weapons. And the way that they do that is they allow inspectors to come in periodically and many times unannounced to check it out, to see, hey, are you guys making bomb stuff or are you guys, not making bomb stuff? The big concern comes in is that, okay, cool, I could set up a nuclear reactor in the middle of, I should say, I can set up an enrichment plant to create the fuel and allow all the people in and out to see what we're doing, right? But what I could also do is siphon out small quantities of the fissile material that we're using to a secret location somewhere where we're actually producing nuclear materials for bombs, right? And that would be relatively easy to do once they already have the technology to create it, because it's like they already have the blueprint. They know how the thing is made, so they can look at it, they can study it, they can create their own, right? And put it somewhere in a dark site that nobody knows about. And this is the concern about many countries with their nuclear weapons. I mean, right now, Trump's going to North Korea right now to have re-engaged talks, and a big issue is whether or not Kim Jong-un is still refining nuclear weapons grade uranium. It's kind of hard to tell, It's hard to tell. So just the act of giving these things to this technology to any country, and I mean any country, it's something that you need to pay a lot of fucking attention to, because it's a very easy path to go from making nuclear material for energy and making nuclear material for bombs. Thankfully, we've got international treaties in place that, we have watchdogs that monitor this stuff and do a pretty good job at it. But, let's be real. Saudi Arabia isn't the most transparent of countries, The question has to come to your mind when dealing with this kind of shit. It's like, are they going to stick to the plan? Are they going to stick to exactly just energy production? And if that's the case, like, I'm cool with that. I think nuclear is an underutilized energy source. A lot of it is dirty, but there are nuclear types that can be much cleaner and much more effective and better. And I think every human being has the right to access to energy, and nuclear is a really, really efficient way of getting it. So it's a difficult topic. So I guess my question to you, and I know you did a bunch of research, is like, why do you think Saudi Arabia wants nuclear reactors in the first place?
So Saudi Arabia, so you have to understand the genesis of their economy and
the Beverly Hillbilly story.
The Beverly Hillbilly story. So Saudi Arabia has been very transparent about wanting nuclear reactors. They have wanted this technology since 2003. They've made their announcement that they wanted to work on getting nuclear technology. So this shouldn't be a surprise that the Saudis want nuclear plants and even nuclear warheads, because they've said that themselves as well.
Right.
They've been actually incredibly transparent about this, and the reason why they probably need it. I mean, they're going through a transition plan right now, Saudi Vision 2030, where Mohammed bin Salman is basically trying to evolve their economy from being just a solely exporter of petroleum to something else. And they think that maybe nuclear, well, let me go back because that's not actually entirely accurate. So Saudi Arabia, their economy is based on what the price of oil is right now. So in 2015, when the price of oil was like $30 a barrel, they were screwed. So their entire economy is based on oil, and they need to export as much oil as possible. That's how they can keep up with. That state requires a large amount of oil revenue in order for them to dish out essentially the subsidized living, the social services and the subsidized living standards of the civilian population.
Right.
Like, why don't you think that Saudi Arabia went through an Arab Spring? It's
Right.
because they paid off the population not to.
They bribed them. Yeah.
They bribed them. So they're able to do that because they have so much oil revenue. Another thing to take note is that Saudi Arabia is also the largest consumer of petroleum and energy in general in the Middle East.
Yeah,
And
they're in the middle of the desert. They need to like figure out. They need the energy to just make it habitable.
Yeah, exactly. And not only just in the Middle East, but also in the world. And just think about all the requirements that Saudi Arabia has. They're giving out all these social services. They're subsidizing they're subsidizing things like electricity, water, medical expenses.
Right.
You need a lot of energy to make that possible.
Right.
You also need a lot of energy to I guess subsidize and not to subsidize, not the right word, but to keep the oil industry going.
Right.
That they have, because they're going, they're shipping oil out of, I believe they're shipping oil out of 4 major ports. Two of them are on the east coast or on the Strait of Hormuz. The other big one is on the west coast over into the Red Sea, but their major shipping ports are all on the east coast as well. They're all on the east coast. They have one pipeline that goes from east to south, from their oil fields in the east over to their port into the west. Now, what is really interesting about Saudi Arabia is that their top trading partners, about 60% of their oil exports, they go out east. So they go to China, they go to Japan, they go to India, they go to South Korea, they go to Singapore. Those are their biggest trading partners,
Right.
And where they have a trade surplus with. That's over 60% of their oil exports are going out east. They're going out. So they're all going. They need that Strait of Hormuz that goes out. Now, what's to say if Iran were to ever if Iran, or if there was ever a conflict with Iran, they would shut down the Strait of Hormuz. If the Strait of Hormuz was ever shut down,
right,
that would cripple the Saudi economy.
Right.
It would absolutely cripple them. They wouldn't be able to export 60% of their oil.
Right.
They have.
Right.
That's the primary reason for the war in Yemen.
Right.
Is because they're trying to get port access
to the straits. Right. Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get port access outside of the straits.
Mm-hmm.
Saudis proposed a pipeline that would go
through
north and south to the port in Yemen.
Right. And then that would take away Iran's strength against Saudi Arabia.
They would still be fucked regardless if they couldn't ship out of the Strait of Hormuz, but it wouldn't be as crippling, because that would cripple the Saudi economy.
Right.
So they require nuclear energy because they need to be able to export as much oil to continue the subsidies they give out to their population, because that's how the Saudis stay in line. They subdue and they dish out social benefits to their civilian population so they don't revolt. Like there's a mutual understanding between the Saudi royal family and the civilian population.
Right.
So they need that. They need to have another form of energy so they can ship out. They can ship out additional
oil. Right. They need to
oil.
subsidize They need to supplement their own energy consumption with something other than. It's like they're not trying to get high on their own supply, basically.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Like they don't want to use their own oil for their own energy needs because that's their moneymaker, right? But I mean, my question to you is like, okay, that seems like a reasonable want. Like, they want to be more, I guess, energy independent, so that they can keep selling more oil. But that's kind of the same thing, the same reason why Iran wants nuclear. I mean, I'm not an expert on Iran at all. However, from what I understand, they need the energy production as well. They're in a similar region. They have similar challenges as Saudi Arabia, and arguably bigger challenges because of all of the sanctions that go around Iran. They can't export as much as Saudi Arabia at all because of sanctions, and so they also want nuclear energy for civilian reasons to meet their own energy consumption. So it seems like, and you can chime in on this, but it seems like we're holding we're holding Iran to one standard, and potentially we're holding Saudi Arabia to a completely different one. The needs are the same, at least on the face of them, and the risks are the same on the face of them. If we give Iran, capability to make nuclear energy for themselves, then we also risk them creating a bomb. But the same could be said of Saudi Arabia or any country that we give this technology to.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's the exact same reason why Iran wants a nuclear program, is because they want to export more oil. Usually, I mean, it's not wrong to want a nuclear program.
It's not.
It benefit. Like, if you want to create more energy and you want to export more of your natural resources or more petroleum products, then it's not irrational to want to do that. Like,
right.
it makes perfect sense. And yeah, I think Iran stems in the same way. And obviously, we're picking and choosing based on what government is more friendly with the United States. Saudi is our ally.
That's right.
That's it. I mean, that's plain and simple. And it definitely seems that this deal was they try to push this through. I mean, it's a case of crony capitalism, really. Like,
that's right.
It's just they're trying to push this deal through. So these guys who were, I mean, it's all ex-generals and ex-congressmen who are on the board. Like, they're just trying to make a buck off this deal. This deal from IP3 International, the only project that they're working on is this Middle East Marshall Plan.
Right.
And, it's just...
So, I mean, I've got some interesting things on that, too. And I guess some of where the domestic concerns come from this is that, one, and I'm reading this here, the export of American nuclear technology that could be used to create either nuclear weapons or nuclear reactors is strictly controlled under the Atomic Energy Act of 1954. So the act actually says that Congress has the express power and necessity to approve exports of this technology. Like, it has to go through Congress first. And what's domestically troubling about this deal is that Michael Flynn, disgraced national security advisor, was working on this before Trump even got elected, right? IP3 was working on this before he even got elected, and they were warned about the fact that they have to go through those legal requirements, and they ignored it. And now they're trying to push this through. They're trying to circumvent the reasonable legislation that requires Congress to sign off on this, for the reasons that I pointed out before, because this technology is extremely sensitive and can be used to develop weapons. And so we really need to pay attention to who we give this shit to.
I'm bringing up the response from IP3 International. See if I can find it. So, all right. IP3 was formed in June 2016 to address security issues arising out of plans throughout the Arab states to industrialize their economies and move them away from exclusive reliance on oil and toward conventional industrial pursuits such as mining, manufacturing, heavy industry, and agriculture. It was clear such a transformation will require the development of enormous baseload power generation, and it was clear Russia and China intended to build, own, and operate nuclear plants to deliver that power and thereby gain influence with the host countries. It goes on for a couple more paragraphs, but I think that summarizes it pretty well.
That's a good summary. And it's not unreasonable either. It would be in the U.S. national interest to get to it first, right? We don't want our, adversaries to basically have that much sway over huge oil producing companies like that, countries like that. I get it. We want to get there first. But they're ignoring the protocols. They're ignoring these precedents. And to your point earlier, they're just trying to make a buck, Like let's be real, they're trying to make money.
No, it's a case of crony capitalism, I think, at the end of the day. But we're also dealing with Saudi Arabia, and you always have to think twice when dealing with anything Saudi related, because
right. Which is why this article struck my attention and why I sent it to you immediately when I saw it, because I'm like, wait, why are we considering giving them this technology? Like, what's the angle here?
Well, I think we should go over the question is, does Saudi Arabia already have access to nuclear technology?
I don't know the answer to that.
So something that's interesting is that, I mean, Saudi Arabia has always been transparent about their desire for a nuclear program.
That's right.
They've been very transparent about that. They initially said that they wanted one because of for energy concerns, for civilian purposes. However, Mohammed bin Salman straight up said that if Iran gets a nuke, we want a nuke.
Right.
He straight up said that. Like he said that if Iran has nuclear weapons, then we're going to get nuclear weapons. Straight, clear, and simple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and even better than that, we want to get the bomb before they do.
Yes. And in 2008, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia, they signed an agreement under the Atoms for Peace program that would boost the Saudi nuclear civilian program.
Right.
So this isn't like something that's new. This has been in development for a very long time. We've been talking to Saudi Arabia about the possibility of them having a nuclear program for over 10 years at this point.
That's right.
So this shouldn't be a big surprise. But the question is, does Saudi have nukes already? Well, there were strategy papers released in 2003 that laid out specific plans. This is straight from Saudi Arabia for their nuclear program, or why they would need a nuclear program. And I guess the three main
civilian
points,
nuclear program, not necessarily their weapons program.
No, their weapons program.
Oh shit! Okay.
So this was 2003. Take note. This was right during the invasion of Iraq. U.S.-Saudi relations were at a relatively lower point in their history.
Understandably so.
The U.S. and Saudi Arabia, they've had their ups and downs in their relationships. Like they've had their very big highs and their very big lows. Like their highs were during their coalition together to boot the Russians out of Afghanistan. That would be a high. Another high would be when the U.S. invaded, well, not invaded, but when they Desert Storm Operation 1, when first Gulf War, that was a Saudi-U.S. coalition together. Those are the highs. The lows are when, obviously, the 1973 oil embargo is like probably the lowest point in our history with Saudi Arabia, when Saudi Arabia figured out that they could weaponize oil. That's the true weapon. They can weaponize the production of oil.
That's right.
And two, when obviously 9/11 is the other major low, because 15 out of the Saudi hijackers were Saudi Arabians. That's what most Americans know about Saudi Arabia, is that the majority of the 9/11 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia.
That's correct.
Well, when that point was at a low period in 2003, they released papers that they wanted to acquire nuclear capabilities as a deterrent. Another key thing is that they would either maintain or enter into an alliance with an existing nuclear power that would offer protection. And the third point would be to try and reach a regional agreement on having a nuclear-free Middle East. So that came from strategy papers out of Saudi Arabia. They laid out their plans of three cases, or their three strategies of revolving nuclear weapons. So as a deterrent, if they needed one, meaning let's just say if Iran got one, they would maintain an alliance with the one. Pakistan is like the biggest example of that.
Potentially the U.S.
Or just no one else could have them. Well, Pakistan, what's interesting about the Saudi relationship with Pakistan is that Saudi Arabia, they financed that agreement. I mean, they financed Pakistan's nuclear weapons program. This goes back to the 70s.
Right.
So Saudi Arabia was involved in Pakistan's nuclear weapons program.
Right. They couldn't do it themselves, so they're just like, let me just put a bunch of money into somebody else's with the hopes that maybe we can get some benefit out of it.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, when they were building that nuclear weapons program, Saudi Arabia was selling them super cheap oil. So I guess there's a conspiracy or a theory that Saudi Arabia already has access to nuclear weapons, which I find pretty I don't really find realistic, but I mean it's entirely possible. I don't know what you think about that.
What was the question? Sorry.
So what do you think about? Do you think it's probable that Saudi Arabia already has access to nuclear weapons or at least nuclear technology through Pakistan?
I mean, yeah. I wasn't as well versed on their financing of Pakistani nuclear technology. With that knowledge, I think, all bets are on the table. I think it's entirely possible. I mean, we look at countries like Israel, for example, who everybody kind of knows they got the bomb, but they're not open about it, right? And we look at countries like, for example, North Korea, who say they have the bomb and have been working on the bomb. To what degree they're at, is questionable. I think the idea that that Saudi Arabia could also have access to nuclear weapons technology or just nuclear weapons in general, fissile materials, is entirely possible. One thing I will say is that they certainly have the delivery capabilities, right? So a big part of, watching out for nuclear weapons, let's take North Korea as a good example, is that, all right, they're enriching their own uranium. They're like saying, fuck you to the world. We're doing whatever we want, right? But the reason why it's been relatively okay, and it's not okay, but the reason why it hasn't been that bad is because they don't have the delivery system to be able to weaponize that. And by that, I mean rockets, missiles, or alternate methods like submarines that launch missiles or airplanes that drop bombs, right? They just didn't have the capability to deliver it. Saudi Arabia absolutely has that capability. Saudi Arabia has top-notch, fighter jets, including they're purchasing F-35s, so that's one delivery system. I don't know actually if they have submarines, but I do know that they are purchasing and have S-300s, which are the Russian surface-to-air missiles, which absolutely can be outfitted with nuclear warheads. And they're not a part of the, what do they call that treaty? We just talked about it not too long ago. The intermediate missile IMS, I think is the missile treaty that the U.S. and Russia are in to not make medium-range ballistic missiles. They're not in that, so they totally have medium-range ballistic missiles. They probably make them out of necessity just because they want to thwart the threat against Iran. So when I think about this holistically, I know that they can deliver a nuclear weapon. I know that they have stated their intent to have a nuclear weapon. I know their intent to acquire the technologies by which they could enrich their own nuclear weapons. And now I know that they've been funding Pakistan's nuclear weapons program. All of those things, in my opinion, lead to, yes, it's entirely possible that they already have it. And if they don't already have it, they're definitely working towards getting it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. I think it's entirely possible that they have it as well. That's why I think that their desire is more based on the economic side and their energy policy more than just creating a nuclear warhead. I just think that the need for them to adopt nuclear technology so they can export more oil is the primary reason why they're seeking a nuclear program. I think their intent is a civilian program because I think if they had the weapon, they probably already have access to it.
Right.
So that's
with Iran. Iran's been like 5 years away from making a bomb for the last 30 years. you know, and a big reason for that is because we're just not giving them this nuclear technology for their civilian purposes, right? That's always been the concern. Don't give Iran the nuclear stuff because then it'll increase their capability to create a nuclear weapon much quicker. I think the same is true of Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is right now a pretty aggressive state. You know, if we look at the war in Yemen and the things that they do and the humanitarian crisis that it is. I mean, I said this on our episode about the S-300. Like, them getting S-300s, in my opinion, just means that they're going to use them offensively, you know, not necessarily just defensively. I don't trust them. I don't trust their military. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that their biggest priority is to become energy independent, but the added benefit is now they can also create a nuclear weapon, and I don't necessarily trust that they won't, and I don't necessarily trust that if they do, that they won't think about using it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Something that I think this is a good segue into our next topic, and
Sure.
I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I just came to mind.
Yeah.
I saw that the U.S. Trump is blocking the sale of F-35s to Turkey because Turkey's buying S-400s from Russia. Curious what your thoughts were on that.
I mean, that's bullshit. That's bullshit because Saudi Arabia has them too. You know, it's like, what the fuck? Like, we're selling F-35s to Saudi Arabia, a whole lot of them. Trump's like big and huge about like, we're going to make so much money with them. We're selling them over $100 million in military tech, you know, haha, right? And Saudi Arabia, I said this before, Saudi Arabia is not in NATO. Turkey is in NATO, right? And we're not going to sell our own NATO members F-35s because they're buying S-400s from Russia. Meanwhile, our not NATO ally, Saudi Arabia, already has these damn things, and we're still going to sell it to them, and we're proud to sell it to them because we're going to make money. What the fuck? Like, if we're going to sell F-35s to any country, sell them to all the fucking countries. Like, if you're going to go on we're trying to make money and increase jobs, you better apply that shit to everybody because this bullshit. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. I got really excited about that. It's just bullshit. What do you think?
I don't know. It seems pretty arbitrary to me. There's obviously a lot more favor within the White House and guys like Jared Kushner towards Saudi Arabia than Turkey.
He was paid off. Here, I'm going to pull that up because that's interesting. He was literally paid off. So one of the nuclear manufacturers that could benefit from this deal is Westinghouse Electric, which is a subsidiary of Brookfield Asset Management. And that specific Brookfield Asset Management provided financial relief to Jared Kushner's family. And I want to point out provided, past tense, meaning they've already given him money, right? And so Jared Kushner and Michael Flynn have been pushing this fucking Saudi Arabia deal. He already got the bribe money. Like, it's already in his pocket. His family already, benefited from it, and they're trying to push this Saudi Arabia deal. This is the quid pro quo. This is the tit for tat. Like, don't get me started on Jared Kushner. He's got debts to pay, and I think he considers himself a Lannister.
But he's going to be the one that solves Israel-Palestine.
Get the fuck out of here with that shit, dude.
It's up to Jared Kushner. You ever hear him speak? He speaks hey.
He's like a 10-year-old boy in a 30-something-year-old man's body.
There's a rumor that he's gay.
Cool.
Not that it matters, but there's a rumor that I heard a rumor like that he's I don't whatever. Let's pass that rumor. Not pass it on. Let's just say let's pass that topic on to another one. But I found that interesting. I didn't actually read into the headline, but I just saw. I read the first paragraph. I didn't go through the whole thing, but I saw that they trumped the. I saw that they were
blocking the F-35 sale.
Yeah, Turkey. They're pissed off. Good for Turkey. They don't have to get more F-35s. Probably a blessing in disguise for them, right? Yeah, it's a blessing in disguise. But
go buy the shitty planes.
Go buy a MiG from Russia instead.
Wouldn't be buying. No, MiGs are old, dude. They buy Sukhois.
The Sukhois, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to get into one last thing and then let's wrap things up. Cool. So, I spoke to Mohammed Sahimi the other day. I encourage everyone to listen to that interview because it's really awesome. In that interview, we talk about the different opposition groups in Iran. Basically, what Mohammed highlights is that there's two types of internal oppositions in Iran. There is a real opposition and there's a fake opposition. The real opposition their movements, their movements like the Green Revolution or the Green Movement in Iran.
The Green New Deal.
Yeah, there are people within Iran that want true change from the hardliners. They want reform. However, they're still patriots, and they'll never take the side of a foreign power over other Iranians. The true opposition are people who don't believe in economic sanctions. They don't want aggressive regime change. They don't want war or invasion. They just want natural reform. Then there's a fake opposition group as well. And what Muhammad outlines, and I encourage everyone to listen to this interview because it's really, really good, and Muhammad Sahimi really breaks this down really well. But this fake opposition are like ex-monarchists and people who've been Iranians who've been exiled, who are like creating different lobby groups to try to facilitate economic sanctions and regime change and create these news networks that broadcast into Iran that encourage revolution, that encourage change. They're seen as the fake opposition is because to the average Iranian, it seems like they're traitors. And if there's an Iranian who's watching this or someone who's involved in like either of these movements, please feel free to chime in the comment section. But they feel like they're traitors. These people who are coming in, who are either exiled or living in Canada, and they're trying in their champion economic sanctions that harm the civilian population.
That's right.
So, the U.S. State Department, what did they do?
Here we go.
So we all know that there was a video for the 40th year. Well, I don't know if everyone knows, but there was a video that was released from Iran. This like animated video of Danny. You go into this video real quick. You've watched it more times than I think.
So the video Iran put out on one of Iran's TV stations is of a Ghadir class submarine, which is one of their small midget submarines. That's a technical term, by the way. Small submarine. Basically, it's a shitty ass like pre-Pixar animation where the Ghadir class submarine sinks a U.S. carrier group, which is crazy. But basically, they're doing it to flex their dick muscle, and it's we just passed the 40-year anniversary of the revolution, and they're trying to say like, hey, watch out, America! Like we got this shit. We got awesome submarines that don't really have very good range or speed or armaments.
Yeah, it was a silly video, and it was a very North Korea-like video.
It was hilarious.
It was like one of those North Korean videos that show like a North Korean ship blowing up a U.S. carrier or something. Like it was just like silly. A lot of those hardliners in Iran, or most of them, are silly. I don't think they're good leaders. However, so the State Department released a video. I don't know if it was in response to this weird animated video of this guy. I'm not even sure who it is. I'm going to play the video right now. So,
the people of the United States and the people of Iran should have diplomatic ties. Our hope is that the regime will choose to end its policies that threaten the United States and our partners in the Middle East. It can choose to do this or watch its economy crumble. The people of Iran will not achieve their enormous potential so long as the regime pursues its current course of oppression, economic mismanagement, environmental destruction, and violent misadventures abroad.
In this video, they're basically encouraging revolution, and they're saying that, don't go through economic suffering, don't go through this harsh economic suffering, and rise up against your government. And this is exactly the type of behavior that alienates us from that natural ally if we wanted to have organic regime change in Iran.
That's right.
The best way, if you want regime change in Iran, then just stop talking about regime change in Iran. Stop putting economic sanctions on Iran. Stop harming the civilian population there, because all you're doing is just alienating people there, and you're making them dislike America more, because people are always going to side with their own country, or patriots are always going to side with their own country over a foreign power, even if they don't like the people who are in charge of the government at that time.
That's right.
They're not going to be traitors. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Stop trying to lobby regime change and economic sanctions that hurt the civilian population. It only causes more harm and creates more dissent from you.
Right.
It creates things like terrorism. It creates things like a lot of human suffering. It creates alienation from people who would naturally be your ally. So stop putting these stupid videos out. You're causing more harm than good. I don't know. I think we can end on that, unless you have something to add to it.
Couldn't have said better myself.
All right. All right. Let's wrap this up. So I'm not sure. This episode will probably be released on Monday. So you may have noticed that there's going to be a couple of brand changes. Don't get alarmed. We're just kind of going through a brand overhaul with Bro History.
We're going through branding puberty right now.
Puberty.
There's some changes in our body.
Changes in just like the aesthetics and things like that. Nothing really crazy. But just don't think that we disappeared. That's the only thing I want to say. And then let's close this thing out. We're almost at an hour right now.
All right.
Peace, everyone.
See ya.